suggestion and recommendation of my surgeon was to wait and hold off.
And that's what you did? You waited.
And that's what I did. I waited 3 months, and then I had the mammogram. And then the mammogram actually was abnormal, or suspicious, I should say. So I electively chose to have the right breast off, and I was very fortunate that there was no cancer in the right breast.
How did people respond when you actually decided to remove both breasts?
There were mixed reservations. I had a couple of people saying, why would you take off a healthy breast? And then I had people saying, you know, you need to feel comfortable, and I didn't want to go through life worrying about, oh my God, if I can have a recurrence, what am I going to do? I don't want to have to go through chemotherapy. I don't want to have to go through, and the fear alone is not worth it to me. Where some women, everyone is different. I decided to I chose to have the right breast off, and there were some women, you know, that again didn't agree with my decision, and there were a lot of women that did agree with me.
Yeah, it's hard to think about the possibility of losing a breast, but then also to think what's more important in your life. Do you want to live?
Exactly, exactly. And another thing too I'd like to share with you is that I did not have reconstruction for 5 years. So I chose not to have any reconstruction. So I went with no breasts for 5 years. And that was very difficult. Clothes didn't fit me right. My self-esteem was not like it should be. It did affect my marriage in certain ways, sexually. A lot of times we tend to take for granted and forget about our partner, but I was more so involved in myself, and I forgot that I was even married. So, you know, the emotional side of losing both breasts and not having any reconstruction for 5 years took an impact on my marriage. And why did I wait 5 years? Because for many reasons. I was afraid of recurrence. I was afraid of going back under anesthesia. I was afraid of rejecting the implant, which can happen. So I had all these feelings about not having, you know, real breasts. I didn't feel like a woman in my clothes. I never wore a bathing suit for 5 years. So I was kind of like stuck in a shell, which was very emotional for me.
If you could rewind time and you could go back to day one, would you have done things differently, maybe like for advice for others that may be going through this or in this situation?
I wouldn't do anything differently. I chose to have the right breast prophylactically removed because of the fears of getting recurrence. The left breast, I didn't have a choice because I had cancer in that breast, so it had to come off. But I do want to let a lot of women know that being diagnosed with breast cancer is not a death sentence. Caught early enough, it's treatable. I never use the word cure. I like to say treatable because once you're diagnosed with breast cancer, one never really knows if they're really cured. The fear, or sometimes not fear, the concern of recurrence is a big problem. A lot of women that I've spoken to through foundations and organizations, we all talk about that a lot. After you're done with treatment, what do you do next? Okay, you're done. You don't have to see your doctors except once a year. So you're left like, what do I do next? So it's very scary, very, very scary.
Well, after you went through the process of not having breasts and you decided to get reconstruction, what was that process?
It was wonderful. I called that getting my mojo back. And the reason why I say that is because the day that I finally got reconstruction, my whole life changed. Clothes fit me better, my waist looked thinner. I just started to come out of the shell. I was so excited. I will share with everybody that having reconstruction was the best thing that I could have done. But I did choose to wait the 5 years because for the reasons I mentioned earlier, which was the fear of rejecting the implant recurrence. But how I came about, in one of my chapters, it's called To Boob or Not to Boob. And that was a decision whether to have breasts or not. But I interviewed one young girl in my book who actually was telling me about her reconstruction. And before I knew it, she flashed me her breasts, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe you're doing this. She goes, you have to get a set of these. I can't believe that you did not get reconstruction. And it's because of her, actually, really, that inspired me to go see a reconstruction surgeon. And I'm very happy that I met her and interviewed her. Her story is very inspiring in there. She's like about 27 years old.
Wow. I'm just curious, where did the cover idea come from? This is really pretty.
The Empty Cup Runneth Over, the cover actually was done by an artist, and I actually helped design that, and we had just the shawl. If you can see in the shawl, it didn't have the bow in the middle. So when I was collaborating with the artist, I decided to tell her that it didn't look like a breast cancer book because it says The Empty Cup Runneth Over. So we decided to put the little twist in the front of the bow.
I think it's very pretty.
the bow is actually something that we picked up on the design to kind of mimic on her piece as well. Kind of picked up on the flavor of the cover. And it's interesting that you're talking about the reconstruction and the self-esteem, because that's really what this whole project is about, is about these women being able to accept the journey that they've been through and where they are and how they feel about themselves, instead of being so focused on this kind of human shell, which I think is really kind of unfortunate, because there's so much more to a person than just what meets the eye. Right. And this project has really been great for that, because we accept women whether they've had reconstruction, no reconstruction, various stages along their path of
One topic that comes to mind that I remember reading was the option, certain circumstances where a woman could have her mastectomy and then also reconstruction all in the same day?
Yes, that's correct. The only restriction to that is if the woman has to have radiation therapy, because you cannot radiate a reconstructed breast with an implant. So that is determined after. If you have, for example, when my breast was removed, my surgeon's concern was whether the cancer had hit the chest wall of my breast, and behind, you know, the back of your breast. If it did, I would need radiation therapy. Therefore, I wouldn't be able to have reconstruction.
You'd have to wait.
Exactly.
Okay.
You have to wait until the treatment after reconstruction is done. And also, I mentioned in the book that it is a little bit more difficult after radiation to get reconstruction. It's very challenging for the surgeon because the skin has a different kind of texture to it. It's a little bit more tougher and challenging for the surgeon to actually insert the implant. It can be done, obviously, because a lot of women do get it after radiation. But it's the consistency of the breast tissue is a little bit more tougher. So, unfortunately, but it can be done.
Another question I had too is the difference between radiation, chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is more intense than radiation, correct?
Chemotherapy is actually administered either through a portacath, where sometimes a surgeon will actually insert a little port, and it's easier instead of getting stuck through the vein a lot. Chemotherapy is administered either through the vein or through the portacath. Radiation is different. It's actually radiation beam actually beaming down onto the breast area. For example, when a woman has a lumpectomy and doesn't need a mastectomy, which is a very early stage breast cancer, and that's the best stage if you're going to get breast cancer, to catch it early, the radiation beam actually just beams onto the area where the cancer was, and that is how radiation is done. And chemo is administered through a portacath or through the vein.
And the radiation, it just kind of causes irritation sometimes, not so much as losing your hair.
Exactly. The symptoms that one gets with chemotherapy is nausea and loss of hair, which are the two main symptoms, but they are treatable. There are medications today that are given, like Zofran or Compazine for nausea. And for loss of hair, a lot of women that I've interviewed in the book told me they made a negative a positive, that they could actually try different wigs on. One was a brunette. She says, I could try on a blonde wig, a red wig, and she said that it was very fun for her to do that, so that took her mind off of the treatment of getting chemotherapy. So it has its positive and negatives, and a frame of mind, thinking positive, surrounding yourself with positive people is extremely important with any cancer. It's very dramatic to be diagnosed and hearing those words for the first time that your biopsy is positive for cancer, any cancer. So the recommendation that I say to a lot of women when I speak, or when I speak at a group of women who are survivors, is that to remain positive. It's so important, maintaining a healthy body weight, limiting alcohol intake. It has been proven, research studies prove that 50% reduction of a recurrence if you exercise at least 3 times a day, 3 times a week. So if you exercise, I know, 3 times a day, 3 times a week.
Never.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. 3 times a week, it has been proven that the recurrence rate is reduced by 50%. That's a very high increase. And they're not talking about intense workout. They're talking about even walking, swimming, biking, any form of activity.
Like your 30-minute average time?
I would say 30 minutes to an hour at least of good exercising. And team up with a buddy, because some people don't get that motivation.